Hello, my friends. This is Mazamir Girma with the Pan African Book Review. Today, I have come with the book Alliance and Alienation Ethiopia and Israel in the Days of Haile Selassie, a very critical one. So, I will go through it chronologically, and finally, I will also try to read some quotes so that you have a highlight into the book. This book is very important because it gives us the history of the countries from the ancient times to the recent one, to 1974. The methodology of the book is he used rare intelligence sources, diaries, and Israel government materials. So, as an Israeli specializing in the Horn of Africa, Middle East, and North Africa, Hagai Erlich has his own points to make, and he has access to rare sources. I know that many of my friends in Ethiopia told me that they don't really want to order the book, but now at least three of them said that they would order the book after I released my views on Facebook and other social media. This will be my first video of the book and second Pan-African review after the book Medical History of Menelik, Emperor of Ethiopia, a case in medical diplomacy by Chris Broughty Rosenfield. So this is my second book. Why do Ethiopians do not want to purchase the book? I know this book has been reviewed at a pro-TPLF website by a certain Claudius, which gave the book a favorable remark and review. This guy has given a positive appreciation towards Meles Zenawi in the introduction. He resented that Meles died without reading his book. He has other books as well on Ethiopia and Northeast Africa. Okay, so let's go through it chronologically. This book tells us that Ethiopia and Israel had long history from just the time of the legendary Queen of Shaba's visit to King Solomon. She would give birth to Menelik first, and that Menelik first will be the king of Ethiopia, and all Ethiopian kings of the last 2,500 or 3,000 years would descend from him. The Black Jews came to Ethiopia after the temple was destroyed, and they would stay here for thousands of years amid different questions. The Falshas, or another name, Beta Israel, which they prefer to be called in. They have long stories, and this book also says a number of things about them. When we come to our modern history, the Israelis would come to Palestine and start to gather their people from around the world. And at that time, they contacted Ethiopia. Even they asked Ethiopia to give refuge to European Jews, but Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, rejected that. They would come and visit the Black Jews around Gondar, and that would create certain concern, and the Ethiopian king would not accept any issue regarding taking his citizens to Israel. Mussolini's or Italy's invasion of Ethiopia of 1936 would follow, and Ethiopia would lose at Maichau, and then the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie. Mind you, this is the second Italo-Ethiopian war. There was a 5-year occupation of the country. Haile Selassie would, with the help of the British, go to Jerusalem and he stayed for 2 weeks there, and he leaves his family there and goes to England and also to The Hague. Is it The Hague? To Geneva to appeal to the League of Nations. Certain royal families and also people like Asrata Kasa, who is the hero of this book and who works for Israel as a minister of the Haile Selassie government, would stay there in Israel, Palestine, and then later would come to the Sudan and fight with Haile Selassie to free Ethiopia. A critical person in this regard is Ord Wingate, who is from Jewish ancestry. He was a leader of the British army, which came fighting all the way from the Sudanese border to Addis Ababa, one of the forces that freed Addis Ababa with the Ethiopian patriots and the other African army organized by the British from their colonies. Ord Wingate was a Jew, and he considered the freedom of Ethiopia as the freedom of Israel, because both of them were surrounded by Arabs, and there was a Muslim influence. Following this, Jewish doctors would come to Ethiopia and treat a number of people, but Ethiopia did not reciprocate this with anything. Israel played a lot of role in Ethiopia's development from that time on. But for Ethiopia to pay back, it was difficult due to political reasons. Ethiopia, for example, in 1948 did not vote in favor of Israel to join the UN or to be even a free nation. In consecutive UN sessions, Ethiopia would ally with the Arabs. The only non-Arab country to ally with the Arabs was Ethiopia, and the Israelis were mad at Ethiopia. So there was alliance and alienation. The main Israeli project was to connect 3 countries with them, which are Turkey, Ethiopia, and Iran. Why they did this was to stop the Arabs from influencing Israel, to deter the Arabs. But Ethiopia would really not accept this. For example, let's see the coffee project. The coffee project was a project which seeks to develop the Red Sea coast, because the Red Sea was Ethiopia's, Eritrea was Ethiopia at that time, to develop as a port so that the Navy would come, motor boats would come, and so that the Israelis and Ethiopia together would have a strong army, navy there, so that any Arab penetration to the area would be challenged. But Ethiopia wanted the project. This first from before the coffee project. Ethiopia wanted it but did not want to pay, so it didn't work. The coffee project encompassed this plus having other military bases within Ethiopia, so that Israel can use them during any bad times, like attacks on the Arabs, wars. Because instead of fighting from Israel, it could be better from fighting from Israel and also from Ethiopia. They were having some oil tankers in the Ogaden and some airstrips so that their planes would land and take off. But Ethiopia did not support that. The Ethiopian cabinet was divided. The Israelis divided it. That, for example, the likes of Asrata Kasa were in favor of Israel, but Prime Minister Aklilu Habtold was against. Aklilu Habtold was pro-Arab, not because he was a Muslim, but he just knew the political calculation. So he did not support Israel, he supported Egypt, Saudi, and the likes. His main objective as an educated diplomat was just to stop the Arabs from attacking Ethiopia. However, Asrata, as we said earlier, was in Palestine during the time of the Mussolini invasion of Ethiopia, and then he had linkage with the Israelis, so that he was pro-Israel. And different meetings, secret meetings he had in Addis or in London or elsewhere, he just told the Israelis that he was in favor of them. It was only Prime Minister Akil Habtol who was advising the emperor against the Israelis, against Israeli interest. Another important thing is the big four, or however you call them: France, Britain, the USSR, the United States. They were influential at that time. So how did they affect Ethio-Israeli relations? For example, I remember from this book, Ben-Gurion was writing to Charles de Gaulle regarding Nasser. Nasser will be the next Hitler because he wanted to unite Africa, the Arab world, and Muslims. So he had to be stopped at any cost. Britain, or the Great Britain, had its own influence in the Palestine area with Israel. So even with Ethiopia, in the liberation of Ethiopia, at the UN and so on. The USSR and the United States were, at this time, the major world powers. It was a Cold War time because the USSR was building its satellite states around Ethiopia, like Somalia, in Yemen, and elsewhere, even with Egypt. It was arming them, but America, to the opposite, was not helping Ethiopia. It was not arming Ethiopia. It was selling only old Second World War weaponry. Israel was giving Ethiopia military support in terms of training and consultancy. That training to Ethiopia was $2 million a year. They were training paratroopers, commandos, the army, the police, the security, even university, civilian areas, everywhere. They were everywhere almost, in the transport sector. There were 70 families in Addis. The Ethiopian people were in favor of, the Christians were in favor of Israel, because once they called for an Israeli Independence Day party, and 1,000 Ethiopians came. To the Russians, not a significant number of Ethiopians came. They called that time around. The United Nations and the OAU are also critical. The United Nations was a place where, in New York, Ethiopia's representatives were told by their government to vote against Israel, even if the Ethiopian people were in favor of Israel. Even the Ethiopian government in support of Israel, but they did not that one known by the Arabs. Whenever Israel gave support to Ethiopia, the emperor implored, please don't let this be known to the Arabs. Help us in secret. But to give Israel recognition, it took them long time. Even regional recognition of Israel took Ethiopia long times. This would anger such hardcore Israel politicians like Golda Meir. Once she met the emperor in New York, and she just permitted him to speak greetings only when they met and when they departed. The other, she was the only one speaking. The Organization of African Union was founded by Haile Selassie. Just it had its own influence. It would help Ethiopia and Africa. Nasser would come to Ethiopia. Once when he came, Ethiopian Muslims who were calling one another in secret just overflooded the airport. So that was really a red light to Ethiopia. Ethiopian authorities were enraged. Gaddafi was another force who threatened to take the African Union outside of Ethiopia. He would ally with Egypt and the other Arab nations He would arm Somalia, assist Eritrea, and so on. Eritrea and Ogaden, Ethiopian Somali region, are the two areas that really are sensitive ones to Ethiopia's security. In the people-to-people relationship of the two countries, there are certain issues. The people would really have favorable relationship with Israel. The security personnel, the military that the Israelis train would have favorable attitude towards the Israelis. Even there are people who would visit the embassy in Addis Ababa. For example, Mahmoud, a known Ethiopian writer, translator, and the chairman of the Ethiopian Writers Association, was asked by the Israelis to translate books. He translated, and his introduction to the translations was more or less like Zionist propaganda. So the Israelis penetrated Ethiopia like civilian, military, or everything. So this would really have its own influence. The other, the largest intelligentsia in Africa. Ethiopia's was the largest intelligentsia in Africa, and the Israelis knew this. That intelligentsia would be eliminated during the 1974 revolution led by Mengistu Haile Mariam. Mengistu Haile Mariam was a military person who was trained by the Israelis. The Israelis would sleep with him. He would share secrets with them. He had some resentment against the royal family and to people who are in authority. Army generals and colonels who are above him. He took 2 trainings in the United States, and he was anti-imperialist because he said he experienced racism in Africa. Not only in America, but also in Ethiopia. He said the lower ranks are pushed out, so the Israelis call him a professional troublemaker. So for this reason, they used him, I think. The 1960 coup, led by another Mengistu, was stopped by the help of the Israelis also. But this 1974 revolution, as the Israelis have written everywhere, that Haile Selassie would not survive any attack, any military attempt. Just they said this would be the last person in the imperial regime. And if any other government comes, it will be military. The military will take over. So that was what happened. King Faisal promised Ethiopia to give $200 million if she stopped military diplomatic relationship with Israel. So when the African Union decided to stop any diplomatic relationship with Israel, Ethiopia aligned with Israel and expelled the Israeli personnel from the embassy, stopped any diplomatic relations. And this severing of relations caused a lot of tension between the two countries, and Israel would use this assets that it built over the past decades. So that results in, I think, Israeli involvement, according to other materials, in the toppling of the Haile Selassie regime. So that later on they would take the black Jews even from Ethiopia. The coming government of Mengistu Haile Mariam, their man, would let them take. So this Mengistu Haile Mariam, they said, had a whole soft spot in his heart for Israel. Even if when he was working with the USSR, with the Soviet Union, he always had a soft spot. So they knew this. It's a big, big book, and I think we need a lot of time to talk if we really have to cover everything. But to my TikTok followers, I think I would come in detail. Something I underlined here: double game. That he, Haile Selassie, could secretly pray for an Israeli victory and appear in public alongside her enemies. So he did not want to tell them, but he wanted Israel to win. But in public, at the UN, he was in favor of with the Arabs. He was aligning with the Arabs. There are a number of issues that will interest you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And all details I have in these notes will be dealt with in the TikTok live discussion. This is the Pan African Book Review. Let's read and unite our lovely